morning. It is Saturday, September 25th. Grant Lichtman here on the fourth week of Wisdom Road travels through the northern plains of the United States. It's been a remarkable week since my last video. I've transitioned to the eastern part of the state, which is rich farming country, much of it really more like western Minnesota or Wisconsin than the dry rangelands of western South Dakota. I've moved from the Native American lands and reservations near the Missouri River and the central part of the river, through these farmlands down to several days in the medium-sized town of Yankton, down at the southeast corner of South Dakota, up through Sioux Falls, which is the second largest city. I'm sorry, I think it's the largest city in South Dakota, the thriving suburb of Harrisburg, where I'm sure the boundary between rural South Dakota and the suburbs have changed by several acres just since I drove through there yesterday as the graders turn farmland into areas for new housing. I'm here today at the Big Sioux River Recreation Area north of Sioux Falls. Big Sioux River's not too big right now in the late part of the season, but it's a gorgeous day, blue sky, a little breezy, a perfect fall day. I wanted to spend this video reflecting a little bit on the similarities and differences that I've found so far between the predominantly or the dominant white culture, most of the ranchers and farmers and townsfolks that I've interviewed, and the native folks, the Lakota and Dakota people, the values, the similarities that we find in the value systems, and then some really pretty fundamental differences. The similarities are so clear, and I think people feel that we have more differences than similarities. But when you talk to the folks, the white farmers and the Lakota both cite important values like generosity, courage, honesty, keeping your word, telling the truth. An importance of learning, an importance of education in different types of systems, these values and more, but those are some of the ones that stick out to me as being so similar across cultural boundaries. And then there are some really important fundamental differences where I think both cultures and many of the rest of us can learn from the folks here in these different cultures up in this part of the country. One of those fundamental differences has to do about this issue of generosity. The white farmers and ranchers just universally said, you know, when you're growing up on the farm or the ranch, boy, everybody helps their neighbors. They help everybody in town. You go help each other bring the hay in. When somebody's hurting, when somebody is hurt or needs a hand, without thinking whether you like that person or not, you go over and help them. And the Lakota said the same thing, but they have a bit of a different spin on it. Generosity to them means really a giving away and a distribution of material resources and rewards. The most respected leaders in the Lakota tradition were the chiefs, the tribal leaders, were those who automatically gave away everything that they had. They were often the most materially poor, we would call it, people in the village. And that's how they earned a great deal of respect. So really a fundamental difference there between retaining, being generous and sharing in times of need, but retaining material goods and what you have, and then really automatically sort of giving those away. Another really important difference that I find fascinating is the concept of time. When you talk to farmers and ranchers, they talk about, of course, getting up early, going to bed late during the growing season, not really having a lot of spare time because of the amazing hard work it takes to work a farm or a ranch. The Lakota have a bit of a different take on the issue of time, and I want to read here from a gentleman, a Lakota elder named Dwayne Hollow Horn Bear. He was recorded in a video by some of our South Dakota colleagues who've been gathering videos, and I'll put a picture of that up there so you can get to that resource. Dwayne Hollow Horn Bear says, in their tradition. If it took another day, then it took another day. If it took another 2 days, there was no real set time period. It was a way of life that our people found very fitting. The way that life was out here, there was plenty of buffalo, a lot of elk, plenty of deer. The rivers were full of fish. A man could get up in the morning, decide, I think I'll go track an elk. Or maybe I'll go hunt today or fish. Or maybe I'll stay home with the wife. Maybe I'll just kick back and relax. Or maybe I'll go be a problem to the crows over there today. He could decide what he wanted to do. Then Western civilization came out here, thought they could improve on a system like that with their time clock. That's a strange world we live in today, he says, when we follow the clock. Rush, rush, rush gets you old too fast. Slow down and enjoy your youth as you're growing up. This life gets faster as you get older. Some days you're feeling your days are boring. I used to feel that way when I was young. Believe me, when you get older, the days are not long enough to get everything you want to do done in one day. And I'm sure that extended quote will find a place in my book if I receive permission to use it. One of the other differences in value systems had to do with disciplining children. Almost universally, the ranchers and farmers I met, the white ranchers and farmers I met, they talked about, paddling kids on the butt. Several of the people who'd been teachers rued the loss of control that teachers had with corporal punishment, being able to whack a kid with a ruler, that was, effective discipline, and kids didn't have to be told too many times to do the right thing if that was the result. In the Lakota tradition, it seems quite different. The methods of discipline were a very stern look, an attitude of almost shunning for a short period of time. These kids wanted to grow up to be like their parents or their grandparents, and they were watching the role models, and so they knew when they had done something wrong because the parents or the grandparents gave them that look, looked at them carefully, and then turned away and let them know that their behavior was not acceptable. And of course, perhaps the most important difference in value systems between the dominant white culture and the indigenous culture here is the issue of how we think about the land and the world. Like many indigenous people all over the world, the Lakota see themselves as very much a part of the world, equal to the animals, the plants, the birds, the fish, the air, the water, and the land itself, partners in this system in which they live, which is very different than the colonial system. Of course, it said, I need to own this land. I need to do something to this land to make it productive, to make it work for me, for my family, and for the rest of us. And of course, that has caused the extermination, really, of Aboriginal peoples all over the world. One of my perhaps more interesting reflections so far has to do with that takeover of land and that transfer of land that here in South Dakota really happened in a very short period of time, probably about 30 years between 1860 and 1890. The Lakota essentially were overwhelmed by a people that had more resources, more money, more weapons, different germs, but they were essentially overwhelmed by and replaced by a culture that had and applied vastly more significant resources. And I believe we're seeing that same thing with respect to this generation of the white family farmers and ranchers that are the inheritance of that early wave of immigrants that came and homesteaded this land and took it away from the Native Americans. Almost everybody, both in towns and on the farms and the ranches, believe strongly that this may be the last generation of family farms because they can't compete with big corporate interests and outside investors who often and almost always have more time, more cash flow, more resources to outbid them for land, compete more effectively on crop prices and things like that. And interestingly, it may be about that same sort of 30-year period of time where this culture of the family farmer and rancher becomes extinct or nearly extinct, almost like the Native Americans did back in the end of the 19th century. So those are some of my reflections. And another one, and I'll finish with this, is this journey to me has almost been in some ways a monastic retreat. When I was younger, I thought, I really wanted to go spend a few weeks at a monastery somewhere, whether that would be a Christian or a Buddhist or a Zen monastery. And for various reasons, I'll probably write about. I never did that. In a lot of ways, this journey is like that. My RV is it's much nicer than a monastic cell. The bed is soft, though my food is simple, but I eat when I want, and I don't have a routine that I need to follow to get up in the middle of the night for prayers or meditation or anything like that. But of course, the world is a panorama that passes by. The walls of that monastic cell are not fixed. I get to see everything as it passes. I spend most days in pretty much silence, reflecting to myself or watching the world go by and thinking about it. And then I get to spend an hour or two or whatever it is interviewing some folks who almost always open my aperture on the world around us, which I think at the end of the day is kind of what Scripture is supposed to do as well. The quiet is peaceful. The pace of life is much slower. When I got to Sioux Falls and was in traffic driving around on Friday afternoon and Saturday morning, it seemed almost like I was in an LA traffic jam again, and I yearned to get back to the smaller towns and the slower life. So that'll be all for now. Again, if you want to follow along and see what I write, see the pictures I post, get these videos, share with your friends, the easiest way is to join the Wisdom Road Facebook group or follow me on Twitter at grantlichtman.com. Check out my blogs. Twitter at Grant Lichtman or my blog at grantlichtman.com. I'll see you in a week. Thanks.